debate, and the honourable member for Langley-Aldergrove.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A real honour to be able to represent my beautiful community of Langley-Aldergrove and share with this House a perspective of what I'm hearing from the community on the growing debt that we're hearing from the government. The government is defending the fact that the debt is growing and growing. The last speaker, the Liberal speaker, highlighted the BC carbon tax is going to be providing hope for the next generation. Mr. Speaker, this is not what I'm hearing from British Columbia residents. It has actually come out that the $35 a tonne, what percentage is that? And I was asked by a constituent, do you realize what we're paying in the form of a tax? Is it 5%, 10%, 15%, 20%? What is the percentage that we're paying on the energy, on the carbon, on the natural gas in British Columbia? And most Canadians, in fact, is everyone that I've asked after meeting with that constituent, said we have no idea. So you ask Canadians, get them to check on their bill. And in British Columbia, natural gas is provided by Fortis Gas, and they have it listed on the bottom. And I'd ask anybody in this House, any Canadian watching, what do you think the government is endorsing as their model, their plan for taxation on carbon? So we are told it's $35 a tonne. Last year it was $30 a tonne, $35 this year, and every year it goes up another $5 a tonne. What does that mean in a tax? People don't understand. We don't know. I didn't know. But when you check the bill, it's 112%. Last year at $30 a tonne, it was 72%. 72%. Can you think of any other country in the world? Now, the Liberal government is bragging, saying, we were providing great leadership, and the great leadership is being provided by a 72% tax on carbon. That last year. This is what they're saying is going to provide hope to the next generation. This year, in April 1st, the carbon tax on energy, on natural gas, this year in British Columbia is 112%. April 1st, Mr. Speaker, just a few months from now, it goes up to $40 a tonne. It will be over 155% that the government will be charging on energy. That's what $40 a tonne means to British Columbians. And that is what this government is saying is the hope for the next generation. And including that, they're going to be putting debt upon debt upon debt in a growing interest rate economy, uncertainty. Mr. Speaker, that is not hope. That is what will become, this is what this government does. They say one thing and do something else. They promise one thing and do something else. And when you actually dig down, you open the curtains and look at the Wizard of Oz that is pulling the rods. Mr. Speaker, this is what we get with this government. They say one thing and do another, and they are hurting Canadians. They're hurting this generation. They're hurting the economy. They're hurting confidence in the economy, and we're seeing this now come out. They've been government for 3 years, Mr. Speaker. In 3 years, they have broken promises and made a growing mess. And, Mr. Speaker, I'm hearing from young, middle-aged, middle-income, I'm hearing from a full spectrum of the economy, from my constituents, even the youth, that are getting fed up with this government. They don't trust this government. There's an uncertainty from this government. And, Mr. Speaker, that's why Canadians are getting more and more desperate, looking more for a change in government, because the pathway that we are on is not sustainable. Now, Mr. Speaker, before I was elected federally, I was a bureaucrat for a few years. And before that, I was an entrepreneur, a business person. And so I know what it means to take a risk. Actually, 25 years as a business person. And it is hard to make a buck. People that work hard and take a risk and hire people, we need them. They're the economic engine of this country. That's what this government has said, and they know that. That is to be true. And so we need to create an environment in this country where people are willing to invest, to take that risk, that there is a possibility of a profit, that they don't have a government calling them tax cheats, that the Canadians are willing to be fair and pay their fair share tax. Mr. Speaker, I've just shared with you the shocking news of what their carbon tax actually equates into the form of a tax, 112% tax on energy. I encourage people watching, go and check your bill, your Fortis bill. People don't realize. And natural gas right now is not that expensive of a gas. It's a very clean energy source. But who in the world, in good conscience, could charge Canadians 112% tax? Mr. Speaker, that is what they're saying is leadership. World leadership is tax, tax, tax. Now, Mr. Speaker, I've been in this House since 2004. What a great honor to be here. And in those years, I've heard over and over again that the Liberals love taxes. And they will say whatever Canadians want them to say to get elected. They will say whatever. Mr. Speaker, but it's a great honor to be here to represent our communities. And every one of us, I'm sure, realizes that great honor. But we have a responsibility along with that honor, Mr. Speaker, is to represent well and to make sure we make this country better, stronger, a better future for this generation and generations to come. And Mr. Speaker, not keeping our promises and putting a growing debt on this country is not leaving the country in better shape than when we came. It's been 3 years of a 4-year term of this Parliament. This Parliament began in 2015. It will end in 2019, less than a year from now. And Canadians will be going to the polls, and they're going to have to elect. And Mr. Speaker, Canadians are realizing that the promises that were made by this government, they promised that they were going to have a balanced budget. There was going to be a temporary phase, maximum $10 billion for that 1 year, and it was within 3 years, balanced budget. And why did they make their promise? Because Canadians realize that it is not sustainable to continue to go into deficit budgets. A business cannot operate that. If a business year after year after year was deficit spending, was spending more money than what was coming in, the business would go bankrupt. And we see that. It's a proven fact. And in a family, you cannot spend more than what you are bringing in. And it's the same thing as in our country, Mr. Speaker. The government knows that, and that's why in the leading up to the 2015 election, they promised they would balance the budget. Have they kept that promise? No, they haven't. Have they promised to be a world leader in putting a price on pollution? They've said they're going to do that. Boy, did they put a price on pollution. 112%, next year going up to 155%. I cannot imagine any country in the world that would brag and say, we're providing world leadership and we have the highest rate of taxation on any country on this earth on energy. 112% next year going up to 155%.
1 minute.
So, Mr. Speaker, this is not what the government promised. The government promised change, not this kind of change. And we will be approaching in less than a year now, Mr. Speaker, a situation, an election where Canadians are going to be faced with a decision, fool me once, shame on you. And they are not going to say, fool me twice and shame on me. They are not going to do that, Mr. Speaker. I believe, and I've listened to the youth. I have a youth advisory board, and they're not happy with this government. They're not happy with what the government has done to their future in saying no to pipelines, to the point where our natural resources, we're not getting world prices for our natural resources. That's their future being squandered, Mr. Speaker. It's our youth's future that's being squandered by this government and borrowing. They did not give their credit card to this government, But this government has taken their credit card and is mounting debt on their credit card, and they're fed up, Mr. Speaker. Do I have any time left? I don't. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Whitby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for his speech. He spoke about leaving the country in better shape than when we started it, in government. I'd have him remind him that our economy is one of the fastest growing in the G7. We have put policies in place to ensure that we are lifting 650,000 people out of poverty, 300,000 of which are children. Next year, a family of four will receive $2,000 more in their pocket than they are currently receiving. 500,000 new jobs created by Canadian small and medium businesses. In this C86, we have introduced a social finance fund to help charitable organizations. We've introduced a poverty reduction strategy. What would he say to his constituents who are benefiting from the policies that we've put in place?
Honourable member for Langley Aldergrove.
Well, Madam Speaker, I trust the member balances her budget every month. And the question that she's asking of this House is, what do Canadians say regarding spending more money than what you're taking in? A company that would be spending money, increasing the wages of their employees at the employee's cost, and saying, yes, I'm paying you more, but all that extra pay, all of that extra economic activity, you're actually paying for. And it makes us look good as a company. Is that sustainable? And the answer is no. It can only go on so long. Where does the money come from? It comes from Canadians. There's only one taxpayer. The government needs to realize that. And the taxpayer is getting fed up. It needs to stop.
Well said. Well said.
The honourable member, there will be three and